five senses. You can't really have knowledge of something unless you've experienced it. Do you think that's true? Can you really know anything if you haven't experienced it?
I think it's
so?
true, like with us who have kids. You don't know what it's like to have a kid until you have one. Because
Yeah,
I remember telling me horrible stories, but then when I had a kid, I'm like, it really wasn't that bad. So.
Yeah, you can imagine lots of things. How many of you imagine all kinds of, you imagine what college would be like, and then you get here and it's not anything like what you thought. Or, you're going to go on vacation somewhere and you have this imagination of what it's going to be like. You get there and you're either disappointed or you're elated, one of the two, because it's not what you thought it was going to be, right? So, yeah, that's a common experience. But what about some people would argue that, have you ever sat down and started working on something like a math problem and you just figured it out and nobody had to teach you how to do it? It just came to you. You went, oh, I know this. I can figure this out. I see how to do this. Have you ever had that experience? No? No? Okay.
Not with math.
Not with math? Okay, I got you. I'm kind of a mathophobe myself. Yeah, so basically Plato, in his writings, uses this as an example of Socrates sitting down with a guy and he's working on a geometrical problem, basically, and the guy just starts figuring it out, okay? And Plato's argument is, see, in that writing, he's writing about Socrates, okay? And Socrates is pointing out in the story, see, I didn't have to tell him how to do this math problem, how to figure this geometrical issue out. It was innate in him. He figured it out on his own. He had the ability to pull all these things together, and his idea is that you have innate ideas, basically, that it's built in, you just have to draw it out, and that's what we do with dialogue, is by discussing things, talking about things, it pulls that meaning out, that understanding out of you, okay? So that's a different way of looking at it, and we'll talk more about that later. Okay, the second thing we have to do in the philosophical method is define terms, as I've already mentioned ad nauseum. We've got to define the terms. We've got to come down to a common understanding of words. Because if we don't, we're automatically going to get off course. If I understand a word one way and you understand a word another way, how are we ever going to have a conversation with that word? All right? Socrates and Plato, they brought a new method into philosophy with a search for definitions by seeking to clarify meaning behind random words like holy and just. And see, here's a classic example. In our culture, this has a totally different meaning from what a Greco-Roman person would have thought. Okay, in the Greek world, they're thinking Greek, Zeus, Apollos, right? What was the movie I saw recently? I'm trying to remember. It had some of the Greek characters, Achilles, and what's that with the Titans? Clash of the Titans? Troy, that was one. You got Achilles and Troy, and then Clash of the Titans had, Medusa and some of these other Greek mythological characters in it. And that's the way Plato, Aristotle, that was their thinking. Okay, they're not thinking Judaism, Christianity, Islam. They're not thinking in those terms. They're thinking, so that to them, when they're talking about the gods and the holy and things like that, they're talking about that kind of a concept. Okay, with Zeus and Apollos and Odysseus and these kind of folks. All right, there's a different meaning there. The word like justice. What is just? That's one I threw out at you that Plato uses. And basically, in his dialogue, he kind of gets to the point where you go, oh, we're coming down to a definition of something. We all have this conceptual idea. We have a concept of justice. But when we actually try to define it, you're going to find it very difficult. Because at the end of the day, do you think that if I was to write all the laws, and you were to write all of the laws, just in our city here, all of the laws, do you think that we would agree on what they should all be? Any two people would agree on what all of them should be. Oh, I'd make it MLK Speedway. It'd be 100 mile an hour, Audubon, I mean, I'd let people roll. I have a good friend of mine is a state trooper. I just talked to him a while ago. I'm sure he would not approve. But, these are the kind of things that we're talking about. When you try to actually, because at the end of the day, when we're defining a term, how that's fleshed out, how that looks in the finished product, has to fit that definition. They have to match. And if we can't match what I think all the laws should look like and what you think all the laws should look like, if they don't match, then that means our definition of justice really doesn't match. Do you see my point? Do you understand what I'm saying? That we can say, yes, justice means everybody gets what they deserve. Or there should be a sense of equality, a sense of balance. But if we can't agree on exactly what that balance looks like, then we really haven't agreed on our term, have we? Because what I say is just, you say, no, you're too harsh. Or, wait, hey guy, you're way too lenient, that's too fast. You can't be driving 100 miles an hour on MLK. Can't do that. Okay, so these are the kinds of, things that Plato really brought to the fore in philosophy, was to show that we have these terms that we throw around and we think that we all have some general idea of what we're talking about, but when we actually look at it and compare it side by side, we don't agree. We really don't have a common definition. And that's really what he brought out. Okay, third, we're going to argue. An argument is essential to philosophical inquiry. Logic this is sort of a side note, logic is the study of correct argumentation. There's actually formal courses in logic. And logic isn't what you think. Logic isn't, it's not like mathematics or, it's the way we use language. Is the way that you say something consistent throughout your argument? Is your argument, does it have a substantial basis? I won't get into too much into logic. It's a sort of a subordinate philosophical category. It's its own subject, really. But argument is essential to philosophical inquiry. And argument doesn't mean, for those of you that are divorced or have been married or had a significant other, anyway, at least, argument doesn't mean that yelling, raising your voice and stuff. That's not what we're talking about. All right, argument being you have a position and you present your belief about something, someone else presents their belief about something, and you realize that perhaps they do not match, and you begin to discuss with one another as to why you believe what you believe and why they should believe what you believe, right? Because that's what we're trying to do when we're arguing, is trying to persuade someone else to see our side of it. All right, that's what we're doing in an argument. And that's what you're going to do in your papers. You're going to make an argument. You're going to make a thesis statement that says, whatever you believe about a subject, okay, this is the correct, ethical belief, basically, about something. Or if you go into something else, that's fine. Ethics is kind of an easier one to do. No child left behind is the most foolish thing that the government has ever done, or it's the best thing that ever happened to education, or whatever.
What is that? I saw that on the...
No child left behind?
Yeah.
Google it, and you'll see. Well, no, I say that so you have a better understanding. I won't go into that too much. It's a law that was passed by Congress under the Bush administration that basically they were trying to correct a problem in the public school system with kids coming out and not graduate high school and they can't read. I mean, obviously that's not good. Things of that nature. Children just getting way behind in school, and so they passed a law that they have these benchmark tests. And they have to prove that they're at a certain level on certain things, but it's really it's a great in theory, but the way it was implemented, there's a lot of complaints about it. A lot of complaints. And there was some unrealistic expectations by the Department of Education. And they're putting special ed students, they're mixing them in with the regular students, and expecting the same results, and this kind of thing going on, and it's a real problem in education. So, especially when there's 100%, because it's no child left behind, so they expect perfect performance on all this. So it's a pretty unrealistic expectation. Okay, when you're reading philosophy, you don't have to write all this down. Basically,